Hey everybody, welcome to the Filipino American Ministry Initiative. Yeah, okay. Clap until you join. My name is Gabriel J. Catanis, and I'm the director of this wonderful endeavor that we are so thankful for. Believe it or not, well, I will believe it, but you may choose to believe it or not. But this initiative, FAMI, is the only Filipino American Christian focused initiative or entity at any religious or theological institution in the country. Obviously, given our focus on Filipino Americans in the world. But yeah, so it's a big deal that we exist and that Fuller has enabled us to say, yo, we're in here and we've been here. So October being Filipino American History Month, it's become the tradition at Fuller to celebrate the occasion with a chapel service in the past 2 years. We did one online, we did one in person. And the chapel schedule and vision has changed a little bit, but we decided this year to represent by putting together what we're calling a mini-symposium. And so because the Filipino American National Historical Society decides the theme each year, and this year decided that the theme would be 1898, 125 years of Philippine American history. We decided to go at that same theme from the perspective of Christian faith, ministry, theology, and community. So we started 3 weeks ago with Reverend Dr. L. Tizon kicking off our time with his own reflection on the theme from the perspective of missiology specifically. And he's got several books out from that perspective. And then last week, Dr. Jordan Ryan from Wheaton College gave us his own perspective as a New Testament scholar and archaeologist. He did a lot of thinking about the Roman Empire. Yes, you got that. And one of our commitments as a Fuller initiative is that we are here more than anything to build community among and for our students so that we can, in a sense, give to them, give to y'all what was not available for folks like me when I went through seminary 17 years ago. Yeah, that's crazy. I'm that old now. That's when I started seminary. But it's just a privilege to be able to work in community with these folks, not just during October, but all year round, to really learn to support one another in different ways through our programming and through making sure that even though much of Fuller's work has gone remote, we would stay committed to some component of being together in person. And this is it. So we're really grateful. And yeah, we're going to begin with personal introductions as in the spirit of a Filipino American gathering. So we're going to start with this handsome brother all the way here in the maroon shirt, and the camera is pivoting toward him. You can just tell us your name, what city you're living in these days, and what your connection is to this guy.
There you go.
Yes. My name is Tim. I am a master's of theology and ministry student here at Fuller. I live in Rancho Cucamonga and happy to be here.
Hey.
My name is Cherie, and I'm an intercultural studies student. I am excited particularly about this topic because it has an intersection with my work. So.
Oh, well, what's your work? Tell us a little bit.
Essentially, I'm still in the formulation process as we're presently getting our research kind of ripped to shreds right now. But it's located in missiology, drawing upon psychology themes as well as pneumatological themes. So it's why it's a weekend.
Yes, welcome, Sherry.
My name is Anna. I'm actually a staff person here at Fuller. I work over at the clinic, and by providence, it just so happens that I have a connection to Denise, one of the presenters. We go all the way back to our college years in Arkansas, and yeah, So I'm really excited to join the presentation and hear from her today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jillian Kruse. I'm currently operating. I'm an MDiv student and also the program coordinator at the Asian American Center. So, and I'll be co-presenting tomorrow.
Hey,
Yay.
yeah. Tim is also presenting tomorrow as well.
Yay.
Yeah. You can swing the camera around. Yeah, skip me, yeah, go to Denise. I'm gonna move the microphone to this part of the podium. You think that'd be okay? Put the microphone here instead of down.
It's fine.
It's okay here? Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bernard, and I'm an MDiv student, also co-presenting tomorrow. From this area, San Gabriel Valley area, specifically City of Azusa.
I'm Christy. I am in the PhD in Agricultural Studies program, and I currently live in San Diego. I'm not Filipino American, but my husband is. So I'm excited to be here and absorb all this and relay it back to him.
I'm so excited you're in the PhD program now. Christy was in my ethics course last year, and she did great, obviously, given where she's at now. But I'm just so excited, so excited about that. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, I'm Courtney Turner. I'm also the PhD in Intercultural Studies program. I currently live in.
Awesome. Welcome, Courtney.
Our cameras on.
There you go. There you
But
go.
they're here.
Look at it. Right behind the edge of the TV.
I'm Austin Hussein with Sheree, Christy, Courtney, and the PhD in Intercultural Studies.
All right.
And I live in Pasadena.
Hey, welcome.
I'm KP. MA2 student here at Fuller, Master's of Art in Theology, emphasizing theology of the arts, which you will be hearing later. I'm presenting today as well too.
Here, let me just. Hopefully this won't be better. Maybe we. Okay, never mind. Alexa and Ren and others, would you just kind of take turns on Zoom, introducing yourself, and welcome to our friend from Hong Kong, by the way. But yeah, any of you, go ahead, Ren, introduce yourself, and then pick someone else on Zoom.
I'm Ren Aguila. I'm currently graduate student on leave from Drew University in Jersey, but I'm currently based here in the mother country. For everyone else, it's 7 in the morning here in Manila. So good morning from the Philippines. Yeah.
Alexa, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Alexa. Filipino American living in Lexington, Kentucky. I just graduated from an MDiv program at University of Chicago. So obviously there's no Filipino American theology groups there. So I'm excited to be here.
Great. How about Marilyn's iPhone? Tika, would you like to introduce yourself and your accomplice there?
My accomplice, okay, are we in?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm Marilyn Penacerrada Arnold. Denise is my niece, my special niece, and I'm so proud of her. And this is my husband. You talk.
And I happen to be also somebody with theological education and a call to ministry and a pastor here at First Baptist of LA.
Reverend Dr. Scott Arnold in LA.
That's the title. impress you.
Like that. Great. I see, well, Carl has a sleeping baby next to him, but he says in the chat that he is Carl Catedral from Hong Kong, in Hong Kong. Yeah, he'll be presenting.
We're half cousins.
October 24th. Are you really?
Kind of, yeah.
Yes. Of course. This is why a family gathering is different from other gatherings. Okay. Because you find out you're related to people in the meetings. But greetings, Carl. Good morning. They're welcome. Jeanette, do you want to introduce yourself? You don't have to, but I don't know if you're at work right now.
Yes. Hi, I'm walking on Wabash right now, trying to get to my car so that I can listen to Denise's presentation. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeanette / JJ. I'm Denise's cousin, and I'm really excited to hear this presentation. And I am Filipino American. And I'm sorry, it's really loud. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay. So we had one of the sisters walk in with sunglasses like that, Tita. Go and introduce herself.
Well. What am I doing? Introducing yourself.
Your name, what city you're in, or your connection, your connection to this
The
guy.
camera is way too close. Hi, I'm Kristen, just relocated here from New Jersey. MDiv student.
And then we have two others who, would you mind to introduce yourself real quick?
Oh.
I don't know if we can get the camera all the way.
I know, we should actually go here.
There you go.
Hi. Oh, you're moving. Okay, hi, I'm good. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen. Actually SoCal, born and raised in SoCal. Filipino American. I'm a first year PhD clinical psych student. Here at Fuller. And, oh my gosh, that's so adorable. I'm happy to be with you all. The carpool.
Welcome, Jen.
Can all the kids as attendant?
Yeah, those are her children. Yeah, that's your offspring.
How's your kid?
Oh, look at that.
There you go.
I'm Abby. I'm from Denver, Colorado originally. I'm also a first year PhD in clinical psychology student, and I'm friends with Jen. So,
So, and then there's Vince in the car with the kids.
Can you hear us too?
Yes. We can hear them.
We can hear you.
Yeah. How do I mute me? Sorry.
You're fine. Well, welcome, Vince, and the kids. Awesome. And then I think that Kyle Howard came into the room, but there he is. Okay. He's having probably some internet issues. Anyway, because of time, we'll move into our first presentation. But for those who just joined us, we welcome you. I assured and asked for our presenters to know that this would not be like your typical AAR SBL presentation, and you can tell that that is already the case. But we're happy to be together around this theme in our first presentation. Are you going to introduce yourself, or shall I introduce you? Is from Denise, Penacerrada Kruse.
Icebreaker.
She and I go way back, all the way actually to childhood, and our parents know each other from the Philippines and nursing school. So we are like cousins. We're cousins in the Filipino sense. So you'll also learn that if you don't already know that, because congratulations, you are also now cousins. But Denise is a master's student. She is currently in St. Louis and is also the 2023-2024 FAMI Fellow. And brings to that work and our community tons of experience, not only reflecting on these themes, but also in writing and copy editing, and marketing. But more than that, is just a wonderful person and a conversation partner who we've been able to grow together with. She and many other conversation partners that we have across the country. So I'm just also really glad that she made it here, because, you know, there's just nothing like being together in person for a gathering like this. So each of the presenters will take, you know, 12 to 15 minutes to make their presentation, then we'll dialogue with them, you know, constructively, and but also ask them questions, because this is work in most cases that our presenters have submitted in courses, but also it reflects their interests from their experiences and scholarship, and potentially their future vocational work as well. Our goal in FAMI is to integrate all these things into the way God brings them together vocationally for the sake of others. So we're doing that together, and just welcome Denise.
So, am I blocking myself because I'm not tall? Okay.
Lower the camera.
So we can all see this, and now I can take it off. Very warm. Okay.
Oh, by the way, we didn't hire a photographer this year, so feel free to take whatever photos, because all the presenters signed the media release, so we can use them.
There's a photographer.
Yeah, you are the photographer.
Okay.
Thanks,
So
Denise.
the situation was that I already had plans to come here, and I had my plane ticket. And then Jay's like, also, can you present? And I was like, no, I don't think so. And he's like, can you present? Still no. And he's like, yeah, can you? So here I am. But okay, so we're going to be talking about, oh wait, can they see the PowerPoint? Okay. Filipino American pneumatology, let's go. All right, so I have this particular memory from one of my childhood summers in the Philippines of running in my cousins through the main house on my mom's family compound during a party, and kind of stopped in front of this like makeshift altar in a side room. And there was like a tray, some dishes of food, and an assortment of like beverage bottles. So I looked super confused. My cousin, sort of offhanded, said, "It's for our Lola and the others." Now my Lola had passed away and my mom was 2 years old, and the others, I just took from context clues, they had likewise passed away. So didn't ask any questions, no explanation was offered, but I did ask my mom later, and my mom is a lifelong Filipino Catholic, joined the Baptist church through marriage. And she kind of offered this halting non-explanation with like a very thinly veiled judgmental aside about the wastefulness of feeding the spirits. So even at that age, I felt the opposite pull of multiple perspectives of spirituality. There were Filipino folk beliefs interwoven with Spanish Catholicism, which is my maternal family history, and American evangelical theology, which has been the identity of my paternal family since the American Baptist missionaries that were assigned to the central region of the Philippines in 1898 came and founded the school that would become Central Philippine University, which is a place that is so deeply ingrained in my paternal family identity that to this day, I know more words to the CPU alma mater than I do of my own university fight song. So for most of my life, these ostensibly opposing parts of my being seemed at best irreconcilable and at worst inconsequential. Because as an assimilated minority, I sort of fancied my Christian identity to be non-culture bound, somehow transcendent of earthly identities. But I know many Filipino Americans I know would sort of shrug that off, like, why does it matter? Filipino pastor Ed Lapis said, "A foreign-dominated culture means a foreign-dominated people, and foreign-dominated people cannot draw strength from their heritage. Foreign-dominated people cannot anchor themselves in their past, cannot steady themselves in the present, and they cannot chart a future. For the Filipino to be truly good and beautiful, the Filipino must be free. This is where Jesus comes in. Jesus is truth, and the truth sets us and our goodness free. This is why I believe we should be intentionally learning about these centuries-old beliefs and practices that our forebears in adopting Western Christianity so intentionally detached from." Escalí Mendoza, who was raised as a Filipino Methodist pastor's kid, which I actually didn't know, she wrote an essay about the question of interreligious counter through a mode of narration called ethno-autobiography, which she describes as an indigenously grounded form of personal storytelling as a means of restoring wholeness and connection to the alienated modern self. As part of our own decolonization and reclamation process, ethno-autobiography can connect an individual to a place, a history, nature, spirit, ancestry, and community, taking a step beyond autobiography and bringing about the healing of the dissociative and objectifying construction of self and reality that defined the colonized modern self. Now, as part of her own ethno-autobiography, Mendoza recalls her first exposure to indigenous Filipino beliefs in a graduate level course, saying, "Sitting in that class and being introduced for the first time to the unique ways of being of our indigenous peoples, talked about not in a degrading, primitivizing, and insulting way, but in recognition of their true beauty, nobility, and grace, I saw myself." This brought to mind a quote I recently encountered by Nobel Prize winner Niels Bohr, who said, "The opposite of a fact is a falsehood, but the opposite of one profound truth may very well be another profound truth." So it's important, of course, to enter this conversation with nuance. Reclaiming and learning about the spirit world and understanding of a creator being in native religious thought does not mean the path forward is a clean-cut and return to pre-colonial beliefs, nor is that what Mendoza or I am proposing here. We do, however, need to be able to enter a critical dialogue about the massive impact of the Western demonization of indigenous folk religions through layers of conquest and colonization and educational manipulation. My intention is to provide some background on pre-colonial spiritual interactions and ultimately propose that these can and should be included in our contextual studies of pneumatology, introducing the plausibility of modern Filipino Christians to reclaim centuries-old practices and understandings of the spirit world in light of this emerging new paradigm, especially in missions work of a more globally conscious theology. So, talking about pre-colonization now. Father Francisco Demetrio, Jesuit priest whose life work was in Philippine mythology and folklore, described religious practices predating Spanish colonization as having myths, legends, rituals, and sacrifices, belief in high gods as well as low, noble concepts and practices as well as degenerate ones, worship and adoration as well as magic and control. So this guy clearly got the nuance. These tribal islands were a matriarch-led society with its own religious mores. In its most idealized form, guided by collective cultural principles still recognized in a sense today, such as Kapwa, which is many complex things and another paper unto itself, but at its base level, Kapwa ties into a culture of generosity for community well-being. Now, in this society, there was no delineation between the material and spiritual world. As Dr. Melba Padilla Magay describes Kapwa, it is a sense of connectedness, of being part of an intricate network of relationships. If you fry multiple eggs in one pan, the whites are seamlessly connected to each other. While there are individual yolks, you don't know where one egg ends and the next begins. Now, this sounds a lot like the way we talk nowadays about how Christianity was meant to be lived in community, right? So we are individual yolks, but through our albumin, we have community interconnectedness. I know, sorry, albumin's a gross word, but like, I had to look it up because if I was like, hey, we're connected by our whites, it just felt counterproductive. So it's
Good call.
right. So for these early tribes who again had no clear delineation between spiritual and material, this understanding was not limited to the living. They also believed their society to be inhabited by spirits that included dead ancestors and lesser gods, an invisible society living within their visible ones. Now, these tribal foremothers and fathers practiced anitism, the invocation and adoration of the souls or spirits of the ancestors called anitos. Beliefs of anitism also included the existence of a supreme creator being named Bathala, or in other regions, there's different words for it too, but Bathala was the overseer of all these lesser spirits. The anitos were the intermediaries between humans and Bathala and were classified as good or evil. Now, the good spirits provided good fortune, and the evil spirits, like the aswang, brought maladies or death. Both were venerated and invoked. The former were served to win their goodwill. The latter were served out of a feeling of fear. And if this describes your family relationships, I see you. Dr. Magay proposes the framing of anitos as part of the great cloud of witnesses referenced in Hebrews 12:1. She says, this cloud is the assembly of great spirits who watch over us and wish us to win the race set before us. The Christian faith is continuous with the faith of our ancestral heroes, and its God is as much the God of our anitos as he was the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. My guy goes on to say that tribal Anito spirits represent God's generational presence across the divide that separates the living from the dead. This is sort of an aside, but Anito spirits with no delineation between spiritual and material were also believed to inhabit animals and objects. So these spirits live in trees, fields, riverbanks, springs, all considered sacred places. So thus, they believed humanity was not only tied to and responsible for one another, but the world around them. So well-being here is both a physical and spiritual matter, which I think is very much lost these days. Okay. Now, after the arrival of Spanish Catholicism in the mid-16th century, these tribal beliefs didn't completely go away. Even after more than 300 years of Spanish rule and indoctrination of Spanish Catholicism, what was formed is more accurately described as a Filipino folk Catholicism, wherein one theologian describes, even today, especially in the rural areas, we find merely the external trappings of Catholic belief and practice superimposed on the original pattern of pre-Christian superstitions and rituals. So kind of as a sidebar, it's interesting to me that these 16th century Filipinos were able to operate outside of the dualism of belief that would demand their faith practices have a distinct before and after of Spanish Catholic colonization. To be clear, much of the culture was absolutely lost, having been conquered and colonized, but to me, the ability to interweave both is notable, while meanwhile, my Protestant Christian Filipino American contemporaries and I kind of share these collective growing pains as we break free of the dualisms that have held Christianity captive for centuries. So after the Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries, global thought and religion shifted. So prior to the Enlightenment, discussions of spirits as related to an understanding of the Holy Spirit were actually ubiquitous in the world's cultures and religions, and they were central to the lives and faith of many in the Eastern world and global South. With the Enlightenment came a standard of contemporary European American secular mindset that deemed spirit talk as supernatural or fanciful. So we now know that this is indicative of a very negligent method of proselytization, simply erasing one practice by labeling it as pagan and replacing it entirely with a new one. So as these post-Enlightenment ideas proliferated, the Anitos were largely abandoned, and the understanding of the Holy Spirit has wound up being reduced to a sterile catechism or an internal haunting that provides vague directions, secondary or tertiary to the other members of the Trinity. Now, post-1898, we are trying to reconcile tribal beliefs with our Christianity and discover the possibility of plural paradigms in new mythology. Many Filipinos of the diaspora have opened their eyes to the importance of establishing an understanding of our westernized Christianity within the context of indigenous spirituality. We have learned that theological foundations are born within a particular context, as theological leaders emerge from the global South, developing their own local theologies that are relevant to their particular sociocultural issues or experiences. This isn't a new thing. So Father Francisco Demetrio again, this was a 1969 essay he wrote on the Encanto spirits, which are closely tied to Anitos, but they're another topic. He describes the value of Filipino folk religious practices. He says, "What has served the needs of the people for long centuries before the advent of Christianity cannot, in fairness and truth, be called the work of the devil, pure and simple. Missionaries coming to a new field are not really bringing God and Christ there for the first time, for the word has always been in the world which he made. He is the light that enlightens every man coming into the world. The missionary in his pagan field merely discovers or uncovers God and his word hidden behind their works and lives to the people he is to evangelize. It is in the people's mores and manners, beliefs and basic orientations to life and reality, further specified by their peculiar cultures and traditions, that the missionary is to uncover God and his Christ to them." What it looks like, or if it would even be possible for us to integrate our indigenous spirit world practices into modern Christianity, is an ongoing conversation. For those who propose confident solutions, obviously separate factions exist in extremes, one demanding westernized Christianity be abandoned altogether until we have a better knowledge of our indigenous roots, another with an idea to pull a sort of missiological bait and switch by slowly discipling away the Anitos beliefs. Now, those of us who are raised in Protestant Filipino homes, many of our families did a sort of cut and run move, drawing a hard line between us and Catholic Filipinos, so far distanced that tribal theology was never even spoken of. Amos Young often addresses how to find the bridge of theological understanding across cultures, saying, because the Spirit gives to each person unique gifts, perspectives, history, and voice and witness, what's important epistemologically, is that we attend to one another's witness and story before we attempt to impose or share our own. Out of that interactive witness of listening and hearing, the Spirit enables wisdom and discernment to emerge. So while preparing for this, I spoke with Jay and Tim about how to conclude. So some ideas were to do with like practical or tangible ways that our parents' generation and ours can kind of perch ourselves on the edge of the coin of cross-cultural spirituality. But honestly, my intention here is just to dip our toes into this conversation that is much larger and more complex than presented here. Because as we work out our salvation with fear and trembling, the process is anything but singular and formulaic. What I do know is that there is God-given beauty and complexity in our pluralistic theologies and pneumatologies. And in this journey of discovering our ancestors' spiritual practices, we find our full selves. Indeed, says Esli Mendoza, discovering the world of our ancestors is like being born anew into a new world, a world full of wonder, mystery, and so much more humanity. I get to stay here? Oh. All right.
Well, we have a few minutes to respond to Denise's presentation, but thank you, Denise, that was wonderful, very thought-provoking. So I'll just open the floor to any who want to respond, whether with a follow-up question or a clarifying question, or with some kind of connection, perhaps, to other things that you might think would be helpful for Denise to take the work and develop it even more.
I have a question. Yeah, it's kind of.
Maybe a little louder so they can.
Yes, so one of the things that I noticed, you described, kind of this first experience, in terms of the Philippines and, the food and everything else, honoring, your Lola and other relatives. In Chinese and also Korean culture, there's something similar called chesa. And it's interesting because the missionaries who saw that, they, heard that as ancestor worship and automatically said, this is idolatry, we need to get rid of it. The funny thing though is I remember having a Korean American roommate who was Christian. And when I started talking to him about it, I was like, oh yeah, chesa. It's honoring, it's respecting our ancestors. And so I guess I wanted to know your thoughts. It's like, is it just, what are your thoughts on just having language that is able to easily translate these kind of customs and rituals so that it doesn't get deemed, heretical or syncretism, but maybe it's something that's easier to, kind of swallow in like a real, Christian context?
I mean, my question back, I guess, would be, why do we need to make our particular cultural language palatable for Western Christianity? Like, why can't we just use our own terminology and our own understanding of it? And like, why does it need to be something that also they can translate and be comfortable with? That's not our job. Is that rude? Yes. It feels very rude right now. Sorry.
Well, maybe we have to reflect on the feeling of not wanting to be rude.
Well, there's that too. Look at that. There's layers. Yeah. We have layers.
Ren, yeah.
Hi, good morning. Denise, thank you very much for a very good presentation. And I wanted to point out one interesting connection. You mentioned the name of Dr. Magay. So Melba Magay was my boss about 13 years ago. Yeah, she was my boss, and I can hear her voice in my head every time somebody quotes her. It's very slow. It's a drawl, kind of a drawl, tita drawl, if you want to put it, Lola-ish. And she is big on, yeah, it's true, true. It should be, she was, I mentioned in the chat, she's really, I told her about FAMI, and she's really, really excited to hear about that. I'll tell her about that you mentioned her, so at some point, I'm really excited. But well, you know, something that Dr. Magay did loves to draw from as well. I think her concern for not just in theology, a theology that's rooted in Filipino culture, and I have a similar concern for thinking about pneumatology, because that's actually another it's very closely related to what I'm thinking about in terms of community and how we can speak about, you mentioned at the beginning, but it's really, those two themes have been so closely tied together, at least in the late 20th century theology, especially as people were beginning to see the revival of the Holy Spirit in theology in general. You know, the Pentecostal movement helped bring this about, but you had people like Ibe Congar in the Roman Catholic side. And I wanted to ask, try to like to imagine this, like what does it mean to speak about, you know, church, community, etc., in a paradigm where we acknowledge these practices? You've already hinted at Kapwa as being one of these, and one of these statements. What are some of the thoughts that have been going through your mind as you start working this out in what it means as, well, especially if you're going into ministry leadership and so on? So yeah.
Well, that's a good question. A good question. First, you have to tell her that we call her Tita Melba in our text messages. Like, this is just, we love Tita Melba. To have these conversations, I think like what we are demanding, especially in the United States, of all of like the racial unrest and everything that's happening there, we keep saying like, you need to be uncomfortable. You need to be okay with being uncomfortable, because we have been uncomfortable this whole time. And it's not, you know, it's not the same thing talking about like pneumatology and tribal beliefs and things, but like, we have to be willing to hear things that might be something that our bodies are conditioned to reject. And then we should be able to dig into that. Like, why did my body react this way? And what is behind that? And is that of God, or is that rooted in some sort of westernized belief or denomination, or just prejudices? Like, what is that? And so I think it demands that we do a lot more listening than talking. And like, I think that's the beginning of it. Like, there's no real answers if we can't even have a conversation.
Questions in the room, comments? Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting. I was curious, where do you see the development of a contextualized truths of the Filipino experience and Filipino American, etc.? The diaspora we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Where do you see that conversation happening? I don't want to say in one location,
right?
It feels very utopian.
Yeah.
But where do you see that conversation happening? What I kind of hear in terms of how we're being not a part of the Filipino community directly, terminology feels like a bridging question, and so I'm curious, you know, where do you see, if you will, this I don't want to diminish the heritage by saying it this way, but it's the only term I can think of, but where do you see this baby, if you will, being born? At what stage is it at? And who gets to be that close to the process at this point? What would you say is being?
Wow. Like, as far as where the conversations are happening, all I could think of while preparing this, while writing this, was how would I have this conversation with my mom? Like, how can we have these conversations where we just kind of open the window a little bit? And so I see this within our own faith communities, for sure, like within our Filipino American circles. Like, I know these are conversations that we have already had. But I also think that like a lot of us are just like, oh, well, our parents' generation, they're set in their ways. They're not going to hear this. I think if they'll sit for the conversation, that is something remarkable in itself. Like recently I had a conversation with my mom about how growing up in private schools was actually very crippling for my faith. And she heard me. And so I think of that, but I also think of the difference between us having the conversations in the diaspora and having the conversations in the Philippines, because like there's just such a separation, and we still have, well, I still have very little understanding of like their theological perspectives and their theological points of view. So I mean, I see a lot of different kinds of conversations happening in a lot of different locales and people groups, but I think it's like gestating.
Yes.
Yes.
Your presentation is like really exciting and interesting, and also makes me think of so part of like CMR, the like Center for Missiological Research. There's some visiting scholars, and one who presented earlier a few weeks ago. He's from Africa, I forget which country. He was also talking about redeveloping the mythology there, and a lot of parallels, at least, of like missionaries came in, told us that our practices were evil, even though we actually had a pretty similar understanding. Like there's a supreme being, and these others are not the ones we worship. We just know that they're kind of intermediaries in a sense. And I just thought of him. His name is Christian Chepoli. If you're interested at all, I thought he's doing research right now, so I thought that could be parallel to
that,
this too.
Email me that, please.
Yeah.
You want to spell the name, the last name at least?
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks,
Put it
Austin.
in
Definitely.
the chat. So Christian, as you expect, and then Chepoli is TSEKPOE. And he's from Ghana. I believe he might be here still. Maybe
He
presenting
was in the process of leaving me to sign.
Okay. TSEKP.
Probably have time for one more question or comment. Yeah, Bernard.
Regarding the.
I have a question. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah.
We can take two. So Jeanette, you can go first. I'll go to Bernard,
Okay.
and then that'll be our break time. But yeah, go ahead, Jeanette.
Okay, cool. Great job, Denise. It was wonderful
Thanks,
listening to
Jay.
you. You're gonna have to send me the paper so I can like fully digest it, because I've been driving this whole time. Since my question is, since digging into tribal pre-colonialism kind of discovery, just learning about what those practices, those spiritual practices look like, has there been anything that you've studied that you have been particularly interested in, and furthermore, anything that you've even chosen to incorporate into your own like spiritual practice?
So, baby steps, right? And so my kids and I, you know this, Jay, we started doing Day of the Dead a couple years ago. And that was just, my dad passed away 7 years ago. And so that was just our way of remembering, right? And so those have more been the kinds of ways that I have tried to incorporate this in everyday life, is actually acknowledging the dead and honoring the dead. And like my dad was complicated, our relationship was complicated, but at the end of the day, I know that he loved me and he loved my kids. And so that is something that they were very young when he died. That's something that we communicate to them a lot. And that is why we do our Day of the Dead as well. So definitely leading into this idea of the ancestors being the great cloud of witnesses, that has been something that has brought me a lot of comfort. And so that's been the thing, Jay. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you, Denise, for the presentation. I don't really have a question, but more so a comment regarding the initial dialogue between, I guess, the challenge of how people perceive ancestor worship in the pursuit of indigenous spirituality. I was just reminded of an event that we had here on campus last year, where we had a visual for the victims of Atlanta shootings. And one of the speakers led a prayer that was venerating our ancestors. And I think what was raised was, how different is this to the notion of, again, throughout the biblical narrative, the Hebrew Bible specifically, how different is this to the notion of Yahweh being repeatedly called the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob?
Right.
I mean, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. Yep. That's it, yeah.
Abraham and Isaac and Jacob were not Christians.
Right.
You have to always keep that in mind. I know, sorry. Well, I want to introduce, we all did introductions, don't worry. We all. Reverend Mary Ellen Asada is here, so. And can we thank Denise for her wonderful work?
Good job, Denise. We love you.
Oh, good. You got Vince. Microphone. That is great. I love when families show up. Yeah, and your tita is thanking you and clapping as well, and your uncle. Kalag kalag is the Visayan word for the Day of the Dead, All Souls Day. I don't know the Tagalog version because I'm not Tagalog, but kalag kalag is one of those, KALAG times 2. So you can check that out. But yeah, thank you. That was wonderful. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then KP is going to bless us with an original piece. And that's going to be just really, really good. So yeah, 5 minutes, quick break, grab your snack, your merienda, use the restroom, take a bio break. But we'll come right back, and then KP will be up here right at 5:05. All right, thank you. Pretty handy. The light helps me know. Okay. I think that Daniel, Dr. Lee, aka Kuya Daniel. He'll be making his way here from another meeting where he's at or teaching right now. So FYI. But one of the things we wanted to make space for within this mini symposium, and also we recognize that we're doing this for all the reasons I stated earlier, but to begin communal practice, right? To begin what will hopefully grow into communal tradition. Hey, there he is. Yeah, the family Ninong. Yeah, Ninong is godfather, but Ninong is also sponsor. Because there are ninongs for your children who are there to pray for them and help raise them. And then there are ninongs for a wedding to help pay for it. So one prays and the other prays and pays. Anyway, welcome. I'm not that old. And that is called manopo. Okay, I'm always translating because in our church it's 30% non-Filipinos as well. So, are all the folks on Zoom back? I know some may have taken off, but they're good. Great. So welcome back. We're going to do our second part of today's session, and I don't know what more to say about KP, aka Paul. I just found out from him about a month ago that one of his cousins is actually one of my brother's former mentees, because I recognized his last name and said, "Are you related to Joe Abisamis from Irvine?" And he said, "That's my cousin." And so I tell you, this happened in Denise's portion, and it happens in our conversations with each other, that in a family gathering, you will soon find out that you are related. Are you also?
His uncle and aunt and my parents were in the same small group.
Oh.
Like for like 20 years.
Of course.
So cousins.
Of course.
So problem. I hope that doesn't happen before you join.
That would be the downside of a gathering like this. Anyway, but yeah, I feel like I've been able to connect with everybody as part of family's work. And last year I was able to meet KP, and he shared with me his music. I've been following his social media and really appreciate the creativity that he's going to bring, and that we'll also have in our October 24 online session when Andrew will present poetry as well. So it's one of the things that we wanted to keep space for in a gathering like this, that it doesn't just become a place where the arts or creativity are not welcome, but that we can bring our whole selves into God's wonderful redeeming work. So are you able to introduce your work, or do you want to explain it after? It's up to you whether you want to tell us about it before and then share it, or the other way around.
I can tell.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to give the floor to KP.
Oh, sure. Very good, thank you.
Don't leave till you're in the group picture, by the way. Another thing that we have to do.
Thank you for having me, family. I'm just very blessed to be here, and oddly a bit more nervous than I usually am doing poetry. Maybe it's because I feel like I'm doing it in front of like my family. But I'm also still like super blessed to be here. So I was asked by Jay to do a poem, a little bit about me, and where I'm coming from as a poet. So my name is KP. It is my pen name. It derives from Kuya Paul. And as many of you in this room would know, Kuya means big brother. I derived that from my basically my spiritual formation, but it started to bleed actually within my poetic work as well too. So I just became Kuya Paul on stage. for the many years that I've been doing poetry and a lot of the work that I've been able to be able to create as a poet has come from my formation. Much of my earlier work came from my formation in terms of who I was spiritually, in terms of my journey in the faith. But I found that it was including that, but also so much bigger than that, which comes to the poem that I'm going to be sharing with you today. Just a little history on the poem that I'm going to be sharing. The poem had come actually as commissioned work from a good friend of mine. I don't know, some of you guys might know him. He's actually visited several times at Fuller. His name is Jordi Poblet. And great guy and good friend of mine. He actually commissioned a work for a film that was presenting in line with the Asian American Film Festival. A friend of his actually had a short film, and he wanted me to present it. One of the things that short film and some of what I discovered when I was commissioned for the work was finding this out later, actually, when I started going to Fuller, was it was a piece of embodiment. And it's one of the things that I definitely have been able to explore in the first year, being here in Fuller, knowing and finding out who I am in terms of my identity, and at times putting those things together as they have been pieced out, as they've been broken apart and wanting to piece it back together. I feel like, especially within my journey as a Filipino American, it has been at many times kind of broken, disjointed, and then putting it back together, especially if you've ever served in a Filipino or Filipino American church. Sometimes that feels that way, or sometimes you're broken and put back together so many different times because you're figuring out what it means to be both Filipino and American, and then what does that mean as you continue to work together to put those things together again. So this piece is called 2010, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm gonna put this down because this is okay. 2010 was the year of the endless summer. Back then, it was me and my friends spending countless hours online. See, at the time, we'd spend every night basking into supernatural realms like Azeroth, Overworld, Summoner's Rift. See, I was a human priest at the time. I thought it felt right to keep my friends and I in the fight as long as I could, since we never really wanted the nights to end. See, I remember this one time for Christmas, we spent hours in this virtual gift shop, giving each other different outfits from League of Legends, the video game. We called it Skinsmas. And I still use those characters to this day on the rare times I'm still able to play. You see, one day we stopped playing. We'd see each other from time to time online, but never really all of us together. Yes, on some occasions we'd drop into the same game, we'd play a round or two, and then one of us would say, hey, I got work tomorrow, I gotta go soon. And then all of us would log off too. Endless nights of gameplay where we'd spend the night online until we discovered that morning sunshine. Now it became these quick brawls that would end before midnight. My friend, see, he recently told me that he was never able to find another group quite like the one that we had in 2010. No matter how hard he tried, and I agreed that there was no other season quite like the one we had then. And I started to mourn that loss of past until I looked out into the world I now reside. Because I never once explored these far off worlds of distant galaxies, spent evenings of grand adventures with motley crews of characters. See, the truth is, stayed in my room, sheltered by this idea that I was only ever alive when I stayed inside. And I once thought that we were only truly friends when we were back online again. But even that wasn't the end. I'm still friends with everyone in that group. I'd see them now from time to time, but not on chat screens or video games, but face to face, in real time. Having started adventures of our own, venturing from the dark caverns of our own rooms into the sprawling forests of our own lives. And I took that leap of faith into the unknown, that mysterious vortex of living, that great adventure called believing, that treacherous sea called uncertainty. It was there where I found my life worth living. It was there where I found my family once again. See, we still do meet from time to time, but at coffee shops and at boba joints, or at homes we built from the toils of our own brows. We sit on chairs now held by our tenacity, and we talk with real voices that brought our imaginations to reality. We bond now as people do. Not with Wi-Fi signals or broadbands, but with hearts and with minds and with ever-breathing souls. Connections stronger than any achievement on a screen. We love now with real hearts. We cry now with real eyes. We mourn with real brokenness. We cheer with real voices. We take risk with real hearts pumping. And we fear with real hands trembling, and we embrace with real arms wrapping, and we kiss. We kiss with real lips. We live now with real lives. So I told my friend that I no longer miss those virtual lives, because we're here together now.
Snaps.
Do what?
Oh, yeah, we're not full enough.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Well, do I stay?
Oh, you just can't stay there.
Oh, I stay. Okay, good. Okay. Hi.
We have time for some responses, but if you need a minute to take it in, feel free to do that as well. But there's questions for clarity, any kind of response.
I was talking about video games, by the way.
Yeah.
Live streaming.
I have a question. So as a gamer, I resonated with a lot of what you said. But also as someone who loves poetry but not necessarily understands it, I just would like to hear from you how you see that, what you're sharing, how it intersects with Filipino American experience and faith, spirituality. If you could help me connect the dots, I think I'd be able to appreciate it a lot more.
I think so what this piece and what a lot of I've seen is just like the facet of movement in terms of the Filipino American journey. I've seen a lot of times within my own intersection of in my experience, I can just basically parallel this to my journey within faith and ministry. So the friend that I talk about, we're also ministry partners, and as much as we were all into video games, we were also all into ministry, specifically youth ministry. A lot of the things that we had tackled, especially within our ministry growth, was serving within a Filipino church and the transition between going from like being a Filipino church to knowing that our population is becoming more Filipino American, kind of like between first and second generation. We went through a lot. I mean, not to put like all of our drama like out in the open, but yeah, we had a lot of tension that went through between us and the leadership, first and second generation Filipino Americans. And we look back and we have a lot of regrets. It's like, that was a really great time. It's sad that we had like so many conflicts that it had to end. But at the same time, it was also like the transition between that was part of the embodiment of what we now have within ministry. So now we serve in other churches, and we see the lessons that we learned, and it's always in our heart to like, oh, we really want to like relive the past, and we see that a lot of times. And I have struggles with this as well too, that I'm learning and wrestling with, like even being here at Fuller, like the ideas of like we've talked about it a lot, and I think Dr. Lee has talked about it a bit in terms of just like, is there reason to have like an Asian, like kind of like an Asian church? I think about it as well too. Is it right to continue to still have a Filipino church? I think yes, but I also struggle with it because I'm Filipino American. There's a part of the culture that gets disconnected. So there is a healthy reasoning to move forward. But to look in the past and to move forward, and that's the wrestling part. And that's part of what I talk about within the poem, is just like, there's a part of me that has to move. I think there's a part of us that has to know that as we move forward as Filipino Americans, there's always going to be the transition. I even think about like where I am, and then where like my nephews are going to be. My nephew is going to be so detached from their Filipino heritage because they're born here, raised here, and technically may not even see the Philippines ever within their life because there's not necessarily a connection or a reason to go back. So I think about that, and I think about the transitions that we go through, that not to sound too biblical, but like the whole forgetting what lies behind and set our hearts on what's ahead. The idea that we're always kind of pushing forward and moving forward within the identity of what like a Filipino American is. The same way I had to move forward in terms of just like, yeah, I'm a gamer, but I'm not going to be, I can't spend 16 hours playing World of Warcraft anymore. There's something that just like in my heart, I'm like, I can't do that anymore. I still like the game. And in fact, I saw someone with a Horde shirt, and I greeted him Loktaro Gar in front of like he was crossing the street. So I still remember the game and I still like it, but there is a part of me that's just like, there's a part of me that has to move on to another realm. I don't have to stay, I don't have to like leave it entirely, but there is something new that I have to start realizing, and that means I have to step out from where I was.
Yeah, I'm just curious if how did growing up in a Filipino church form you as a poet, and how did, like wondering, maybe I'm just assuming if, every Sunday that listening to your pastor, or maybe getting a rhythm from the choir or the worship team, has that also affected your, or, influenced your craft?
Yeah, so it's funny. So to put into like kind of current context and then the past, like right now I'm in I've had these conversations actually because I'm in a band right now. I am in a folk Americana emo band, and I play as a drummer. It is not a faith-based band, but it does have some Filipinos in it, and I've talked about this before because like I'm a drummer there. But technically, I learned a lot of my musician skills, a lot of my singing skills, a lot of it I learned in church. And in terms of growing up in a Filipino church, and as Filipinos, like there's so much art that can sometimes be like very embraced. in terms of the Filipino experience. I mean, i.e. like karaoke and whatever. Like we could talk about all that stuff that we like doing art, singing, dancing. There's something embedded in that. My experience and my formation within church was very similar. So there was a lot of arts, there was a lot of dance, there was a lot of singing, there was a lot of performance. Something that didn't click in terms of being within that context though was and this is what I talk about now with my friends within the band is it was never really seen as an art form, even though it was art. I never really saw drums as an art form. It was more like a spiritual tradition. It was like a practice. It's like I played drums for God. And it was funny because I used to say that a lot. Like I was like, oh, I can't sing unless it's for God. Like I can do karaoke for fun, but I can't take it seriously. The only time I take it seriously is when it's in the church. And there's this weird context where you lose the art form and it just becomes kind of like a practice or even like almost sacramental. So the thing that made me an artist was during a time where I was struggling, I was wrestling with this idea that's like, no, I do these art forms, but how come I don't feel like they're actual pieces of art? And that's when like I went through a lot of depression. I broke away from, I didn't break away from my faith, but I left my church context to really discover what it was to use these art forms. That's where I started to realize that I was creating art and becoming an artist. But sometimes you have to leave the context because a lot of times what I found is within those contexts, a lot of things become very sacramental, very similar to like your talk where everything becomes kind of black and white. It's either used for God or it's pagan. And when I was just like, well, I want to use my art form. I can play drums, I can sing. It's like, okay, use it for God only. So because if you use it outside of God, it's not, like it seems like a pagan practice. But that was the wrestling that I had to go through to become an artist, because I had to realize the art form itself. I had to realize that I was becoming an artist like apart from. And even now that I use my art right now, and even if you see in the poem, I don't say God one time. I'm talking about him. I'm talking about what he's done in my life, but I do my best not to put God sometimes within my poetry, just so I can contextualize the art apart from the sacrament, or like the idea that it's sacrament.
Things, I think one of the things I got from your poem too is, and sorry if this like also is like completely different than what is being already shared, but I'm reminded of like relatives I have in the Philippines where I literally saw them from screen to person. So like getting to meet like meet like my mom's side of the family, not until recently. Like I got to meet like my mom's cousin from 2 years ago that I remember from Facebook, and I remember like just seeing like videos, pictures, and maybe even some FaceTime on my mom's iPad. But it wasn't until I actually met her like in the Bay Area where it's like that feeling that I think you were trying to also that you actually executed really well, is this feeling of this is like literally like my blood relative. This is something where I feel like I have a connection to my family where in a nutshell, I do feel connected to both of my parents' sides in different ways, but then it becomes like, okay, like how am I now connected to this person rather than just knowledge saying like, okay, that's my mom's cousin, so therefore because they're second cousin, but it's like now I'm having a relationship with you. And now you're using your body to really feel those emotions with them, feel these thoughts, or just have this is really warm connection, which I think is really exciting. And so thanks for that. So I that's the way I kind of like resonated with kind of your poem. And then the second thing I was going to share, a lot more lighthearted, because you mentioned the person who like commissioned it, right? We're related. And so, so Jordy's mom and my brother-in-law are cousins. And so Jordy and I actually sang together at my sister's wedding.
Wow.
So I'm just like, freaking waving I'm like, hey, look who's here.
Yes.
So, just again, the spirit of like the familia like is really strong, and even in the midst of the momentums of screen generation, everything, there's this thread of like closeness that I just try to.
I think that like what you're saying and what automatically happens with Filipinos is like we understand that the whole you had to be there, because now it's like we see the relations, we see the connections. I think that that's like something that I was realizing both when writing this poem and also like reflecting my own life. It's just like you have to be there, you have to really like you have to be face to face. And that's what I was kind of realizing in going through this. You have to go through the motion and you have to be embodied. It's one of the reasons why I became a poet, and one of the reasons why I'm going here to Fuller is I'm realizing, especially within like the arts community, that much of the arts community that I've been able to talk to, a lot of them have disconnected from faith, from any kind of theology or any kind of spirituality, because there was that disconnect. Like if you're here, you're not part of us. That whole split between if it's not for God, it's totally against God. Where there now is becoming this like this thought of the integration between, especially within art. And it's one of the reasons why I'm here in Fuller. So that's my personal goal, is to bring the art that I have and the faith that I have within the arts community. But what you were saying is like you have to be there. So I'm trying to be a good artist, so that artists will see that I'm an artist and I'm a part of the arts community. So that when I do talk about my faith, they're like, well, we trust you because you're a good artist. That's a big thing as well as art too. Like people won't hear you if you suck. Like that's really it. It's just like you can say you're an artist, but if you really like, you're not. So that's what I try to do. I try to embody both being a good artist, but also being a good person of like who's integrated in their faith, so I can share it properly.
I appreciated the way you talked about ways of being with other people as grounds. I think that that's really meaningful, because there is like a movement, but also there's a ache and a longing that a lot of us feel. Like there's a diasporic ache we talk about, where we wish we could go back. And in that way, I think that's unique to what you were talking about, but there's some overlap with Denise's, connecting back to oneself through something. And in your case, it's connecting differently with yourself through other people, new realm, space. And but both of them have this kind of desire to go back that we can all really feel. And I just really wanted to name that. I appreciate it.
Point about art. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the aspects of Sabbath and how Sabbath kind of meets us human, and how we've over spiritualized that. Because Sabbath is not about worship service. It's not an event. It's not something we give for God. It's actually like just being. Like when Josh Maher talks about the fact that it's actually about like sanctification of time. Like you enter into it and then you just like exist. You exist in time, which is more being than doing, right? So I think I've been thinking about it as like these human practices that I do as Sabbath practices. Like I rock climb, I'm like, what is that? Is it a spiritual practice? No, it's just me being human. And sometimes what's happened because we've over spiritualized Sabbath, because this is like a commandment, right? This is like one of the very few spiritual disciplines. It's like a commandment. We over spiritualize to say it's worship service, which is not what the Bible says at all, right? So it's almost like this commandment is supposed to keep us rooted and know the fact that being human and being in God's presence is supposed to be one of the same. But we've spiritualized that, so it's almost like being a Christian makes you less human. Like you can't have human emotions, you can't have, like, you can't just create art. It's gonna be Christian art. But what if it's just deeply human? Isn't it encompassing of the fact that we belong to God? In that sense, I appreciate what you're talking about art and kind of embodiment and just all things that we're doing. Like what does it mean to affirm that, right? And it being very so spiritual that it's just a fundamental human thing, and not dichotomize it. Yeah, it's a huge problem in the church. The more spiritual you become, the more spiritually mature you become, the less human you feel. Like no emotions, disconnected with your body. I'm like, that can't be like what theologically it's Marcionism, like because you are disconnecting with creation. Like being spiritual is not creation is not part of something that God desires. But that's basically why in the Apostles' Creed we believe God the Father Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth. The Almighty God is maker of heaven and earth, which it wasn't always the case that people believe that. So it's something that we kind of always remember, like our body, everyday humanness, this making art and being is deeply in God's presence. So in that sense, your explanation of it, I really appreciate.
I feel like Denise wanted to raise her voice the way that you did, but she didn't do it. But she wanted to, or she could have, yeah. Other comments or responses?
Yeah, just so thank you for this. Share your passion. Look forward to see you perform at a open mic night and high five or in the art spaces. But I just had a question regarding one of the comments that you made. You said, in order to go forward, we have to forget what lies behind. Can you elaborate more on that? Because to me, what that conveys is, like in order to discover what it means to be Filipino American, we have to forget, disconnect from.
Yeah, I think in that sense I oversimplified, like forget. I think like what I meant by like there's a certain like formerness to like kind of the Filipino and Filipino American experience in particular. I do better with an example, if I can say. Like it's not the sense that's like, so like going into a Filipino, like growing up in a Filipino church, there are a lot of different things like I would say like songs that you sing or certain habits that you take as kind of I want to make sure I make the example right, because I really don't want to say that like you have to forget being Filipino, but there is a certain realization that like as time goes on, you're gonna be taking in the environment around you. Let me say it this way, like my parents, they're Filipino citizens, but being here for so long, like they got the they have American citizenship, and the more and more they're here, the more they embody what it means to be a citizen here within America. And the longer they stay away from being in the Philippines, like the less they're really connected to what's currently going on over there. So it's part of that kind of environment. With our sense as well too, especially like being a person within like youth ministry. Sooner or later, like youth grow up. You're not going to be 18 your entire life. So you have to move. And I can say from experience, at least within my experience being in a Filipino church, there is kind of a wrestling to that. I remember being in churches where I was serving. I was in my mid-20s and I was still being called youth. So that laughter is so like, oh, I can relate, right? You're 35 and you're married with 2 kids and you're still part of the youth group. I don't know why that's the idea, but that's what I mean. That there's like, it's not saying like we're rejecting necessarily culture, but it is the response of knowing that there's a moving forward.
So what I mean by forget what lies behind, and I use that again, I use the term very loosely. It's like you have to forget how time stood, like how you feel like time stood still in your head. And I think that's why I think the poem conveys it a bit more. I think this is why I like art, because art can sometimes convey more of the practicum of what we're trying to say in real life instead of trying to explain it. Because when I talk about how my friends used to play, like we like honestly, we can't play the same games that we used to play, simply because of the fact that there have been patches, there have been updates. The games are not even the same. So I can't play the same World of Warcraft that I played in 2009, 2010, because it's not the same game like 12, 13 years after the fact, because it's just changed. So there's a portion where, yes, you should keep the things that you've learned, but you can't live in that monetary moment. And I think that that's something that's, especially like as Filipino Americans, especially within like the first and second generation, because I mean, if I'm gonna be real, like for a second, can I be a little real for a second? Sometimes when Filipino churches like move over here, well, Filipino, and especially like Filipino pastors move over here, this is what I've seen at least, is they want to keep that microcosm of what they had within the churches that they had in the Philippines. But the community around, the culture around, it doesn't match. So you can't bring a culture from the Philippines and then bring it into like, let's say like LA and expect the culture to respond in the same way. And I've seen a lot of Filipino pastors be like, how come people don't want to meet at Tuesday morning? Like we used to have Tuesday morning Bible studies all the time in the province. I was like, because people have work. Like you can't do it here. Like because people have a 9 to 5. So it's recognizing the culture and recognizing that that's that portion to move on. The heart of wanting to meet like in the middle of the week and focus on like Bible study and the gospel and like that heart can still stay. But you can't ask people like at 7 o'clock in the morning to meet at the church when there's a 30-minute drive and you've got work at 8 o'clock. You can't do that. That's what I mean.
Like, I actually appreciated the fact that you said that we couldn't live in the past anymore, because I think that's a struggle that Filipino Americans have when you're part of the first generation and the second generation. Because I've seen that, yeah, there's that that capsule that we're kind of trapped in. We hear about what the Philippines is like, and even we have parents that go back and live in the Philippines. But as a Filipino American, as a second gen, it's like, well, we can't go back because we are not attached to the land like our parents were. We were not born there. But then you posed an interesting query is, well, what is the future? And it almost sounds scary and a little nihilistic in the sense of, well, I guess we'll just be American and we'll forget our Filipino-ness. But when you were talking about this exhilaration or this eye-opening experience of just even trying to figure it out, it was actually very encouraging to me. Because I think that's what I struggle with. It's what does it mean to be Filipino-American in this land and not go back home or even be loosely attached? It's a point of contention for me personally. And I appreciated that perspective.
Can I say, that reminds me, because like having discussions with my family, we kind of realized that there is actually almost kind of a synonymous thing with the first and second generation in that sense, because first generation moved from the Philippines here, and now we want to move on into another. I have a cousin who has recently in the past year moved to Japan, and he plans on staying. And everyone thinks like, how can you do that? And everyone, very, very Filipino, it's like, oh, you're just gonna leave everything, the comfort and the security. It's like, well, actually, he's doing exactly what you guys did. Like he moved from the Philippines, you moved from the Philippines to the States. Now he's moving into a whole different culture, and he's doing that too. I think, in the sense, what you're saying is actually very it's very synonymous to what the previous generation has done. Is we are trying to explore into something new, into a realm so new. I forget sometimes. It's like my parents dropped everything that they knew and went to a totally different country and just hoped it worked. And I forget that. I was like, yeah, my parents moved to Detroit. I was like, oh yeah, like they totally like just left everything, went somewhere and then just like prayed it might work, and it did. And we forget that that sense of adventure is actually very baked in to the Filipino and now Filipino American experience. So
Time for maybe one more question and comment.
You stated afterwards that there were some lessons that you learned in the Filipino church that, you didn't talk about specifics, but is there one lesson that stands out for you?
There's a certain so it's something that is still right, like to this day I still go back to like kind of these certain moments within like the idea of conversation and communication between generations. I remember one time we were asked to go to like this youth conference. I won't say what the organization was, but it was an Assemblies of God conference. Just kidding. Just kidding. No, but so we were asked, just like, hey, do you want to go? And we were already planning to go to another conference later on that year, but then we were kind of coaxed by leadership, and I had a serious talk with the pastor's wife. I was like, I don't think we can do it, and she just said, just like, no, just like don't like, because she asked us like, well, why can't you do it? It's like, we're already raising money for another event, and she's like, well, don't worry about the money. So what I heard was, oh, they're going to sponsor the event. So she told me, don't worry about the money. So I started planning. We did it, and the week after we got back, I got pulled into a board meeting, and they're like, okay, so how are you gonna repay for the conference? I was like, wait a minute. She said, don't worry about the money. But it was really kind of like a spiritual, like God's gonna fund it. But it's a lot of just like the this is my real ministry. So that's why I'm foot full right now. But no, but it's so just there was a certain kind of there was that draw of communication. There was that draw within how do we speak to one another, and that it was a bigger problem, because for me, like working within ministry, just is like, well, this is my calling, it's my vocation, it's my job. But to them, I don't want to say to them, but on the other end, like it was more like familial. I'm learning this even right now. I'm an SMT student, but I'm learning this in like marriage and family therapy with like the whole like family dynamics, where I saw church as more like kind of work corporation, whereas they saw it as more like family. So as I was treating it like I was an employee, like I'm here to do a job, and I was passionate about it, to them, they saw me as, no, you're our son, and we're trying to teach you the way that, like, that really conflicted to the point where, yeah, I got into very many a fight with the pastor, because I would try to talk to him like a boss, and he would try to talk to me like his son. And that was such a big conflict.
Jay doesn't know anything about that.
But I mean, but that's one of the biggest things that really arose within that, because I mean, and I had an assumption, but the assumption was because where his context, my pastor's context was coming from, is that's how you treated the people within your community, like you were the father of a community. Whereas I treated it as like I wasn't paid, I was a voluntold, you know, like voluntold. But I treated it as, no, this is like a career, this is a career choice, this is my vocation, this is, yeah. So we had those kind of differences of opinion, that in those two generations, that's why we had we were talking different languages, but in some way we were still communicating, and that was a conflict.
Can we thank KP for his time? That was great. Both of you. Wow. Denise and KP continuing the great work that we've already been able to receive during this month's Mini-Symposium. It's super awkward seeing my own face. That's been there for like 30 minutes.
I don't want to say anything.
It's like, I'm so sorry you had to speak to me.
Captive
audience. But yeah, I'm also excited for tomorrow's presentation. So I just want to remind you that we are in person here from 10 a.m. until 12 noon tomorrow. So right here, and we're of course also on Zoom. So if you've got you're not able to be here in person with us, or you have friends who may be interested in joining, then please, pass to them the Zoom link, and we'd love to include them in our conversations. I'm so grateful for what we've been able to gain so far, and I trust that we'll continue building the conversation. Cherie asked, about where is this work happening, right? We're specifically related to the pneumatology constructional work that Denise was talking about, but in a way, the Filipino American theological reflection is being birthed here, where folks can say that they grew up in the context of a Filipino American church, and for all of the bumps and bruises that came with that, also the blessings and the gifts that are going to be passed to the next generation. So it's here. This is what y'all have blessed us to do, and you're a part of it in every way. We are going to take a picture, so please don't leave until you join that. It's hopefully not that picture, but also. No. Let's put that family logo. Let's put that family logo back up, please. But also, we are having dinner tonight. So over at the Asian American Center right after this, correct? We are going to have dinner, and in the spirit of the family gathering, you're invited. So do you want to tell us any bit more about what we can expect there?
We'll have Filipino food.
All right.
Which means there'll be a lot of pork dishes.
Okay.
A lot of carbs. We'll start with, after we can head to the ABC office.
All right, great. Thank you again. Let's take this picture and then we'll head over. All right. Yeah, let's put that away.
Don't change it.